Okay. All right, here we are live for the second edition of Let's Talk. Today's subject will be at several requests that we received through emails, WhatsApp, and talking amongst ourselves. Today's subject will be Guru-tattva. But before we get directly into the Guru-tattva, sort of a lead-in, just mention in regards to our first broadcast, which was yesterday, and which was titled Opening Statement. We received, not many, but we received some significant responses to that. And they were both praises and criticisms. So, praises. Sweet, something like sweet whispers in our ear. So, I would rather like to focus, and I'm going to read a couple of the criticisms which we received. And they weren't malicious, but they were just straightforward, according to the person. Of course, I'm not going to say, woe is the person. I'm going to mention maybe that they're a God brother or not a God brother, but that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to read their criticisms, but I first want to say that they were not in any way malicious, but they were what they felt, and they were speaking honestly, and we think that that's one of the important things, speaking honestly. Okay? Just to mention, Goswami, you got your head half out of the screen again, so, go back, lean back, go back to where you were, and turn your camera to the left. There you go. Leave it like that. All right. So anyway, technicalities. All right. So I'm going to read this criticism here, and then that's going to open into today's discussion regarding Guru-tattva. So there are two of these, and I've got them here, and they are from the same God brother. And I believe this God brother may even be a senior disciple to Srila Prabhupada than myself. So I very much appreciate what this person, it's a male person, a man, a devotee. All right, so the devotee is saying, I'm going to summarize the first part of it because it's a little awkward the way it's written, but we'll get to the essence of it. He says, I understand the points that you are speaking about, but I do not like your aggressive tone. Speaking of the relativity of the words of the uttam, meaning Srila Prabhupada, and in senior company, and not on the internet to God knows who, means who knows who's going to listen to this. So then he continues in a separate post, in a separate thing. Srila Prabhupada's words or actions are all part of sacred history. We're going to come back to these points. As holy as Puranic story, and should never be brought into the realms of relativity. Even when his words may seem wrong, and therefore relative, it is only us who do not understand, and not the Uttam Adhikari Acharya's error. Then he goes on here to cite the example of Prabhupada once said, or several times said, they did not go to the moon, and was he right or was he wrong? Or no, was he wrong or was he right? Because in today's alternative world, there's a lot of, there was even a recent Hollywood film showing how the moon landing was a fake and all of these things. All right, so I'd like to, I think this addresses the issue of Guru-tattva. And I'm going to start with the let me see, the second statement which he makes, and focus here on this point. And if anyone thinks that I'm wrong on what I'm gleaning from this, I welcome your opinion. I either by mail or here live in the chat or privately, publicly, whatever. Here he says that Prabhupada's words and actions, there is as sacred as Puranic lore, means as the Puranas. They're the spiritual histories of the world. And, I might add that in future, in some other kalpa, maybe the story of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami will be told in some Purana. It's true. Purana means history. So we have these ancient histories, but history is constantly being made, and tens of thousands of years from now, maybe the story of Srila Prabhupada will be in the Puranas. I cannot say. But I appreciate what he's saying here. Then he goes on to say that such should never be brought into realms of relativity. Even when his words seem wrong and therefore relative. So I believe what he's saying is the Guru is absolute. Well, what would you say, Giri? You have some experience of this. Does it sound like he's saying the Guru is absolute?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's what it sounds like. Goswami, what does it sound like to you? Is he saying the Guru is absolute?
It does sound like that, but it's not clear to me from that particular devotee's point of view if he's like taking that stand that everything Srila Prabhupada did is transcendental. Every aspect of his life, personality, whatever should be taken in that way. I'm not sure that's exactly what he means.
Okay.
That's how I understand.
Yes, I'm pretty much absolutely sure that that's what he's saying, but you're entitled to that opinion. He says here, even when his words may seem wrong and therefore relative, it is only us who do not understand, and not the Uttam Acharya's error. And he goes on to give he gives the example about the moon. Okay. So I believe pretty much he's saying that that the Guru is absolute. Now, this brings us to today's discussion, because if you ask in the Hare Krishna movement in the Western world, is the Guru absolute? In fact, you don't have to ask. You can just go get so many recorded lectures of present acharyas and leading devotees who are qualified to give Bhagavatam class in most of the temples around the Hare Krishna movement around the world. And yes, the Guru is absolute. But guess what? The Guru is not absolute. The Guru is relative. Now, this devotee who's made this statement is also an appreciator to some degree. I wouldn't say a follower, but an appreciator. He has some appreciation for the words of Srila Sridhara Maharaj. And he has also recognized that in the past, many people in the Hare Krishna movement made a wrong decision by rejecting Sridhara Maharaj, and even a worse decision in offending his divine grace. So, Giri, I think you have a quote by Srila Sridhara Maharaj. I think this is published in one of his books. I asked you.
Grace.
Huh?
Yeah. Sri Guru and His Grace.
Sri Guru and His Grace, one of the most important books there is outside the writings of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, our Guru Maharaj. One of the most important books there is for contemporary Vaishnavas to understand the relative and absolute position of the Guru. So, would you read that to us, please?
Yeah. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, the position of Acharya is a relative thing, and the position of the disciple is also relative. Just like the relationship between mother and child, father and son, wife and husband. Although to his godbrothers, a guru will be seen in a relative position, to his disciple, the Guru is absolute. So to adjust to the absolute is a difficult thing. It is an eternal problem. Even in Krishna Lila, there is enmity between Madhurya Rasa and Vatsalya Rasa. But when the absolute consideration comes, both rasas must be included within the fold.
Yeah, your voice kind of broke up there. We're going to have to get you fixed up with a better mic or something, just as you were reading that. So in summary, though, Srila Sridhara Maharaj says the position of the Acharya, that means the Guru, is relative, not absolute. And he gives a brief example. For example, but let me extend that example. There are many cases I know where particularly mothers, the physical mothers of a person who is a guru today in the Hare Krishna movement has come to Mayapur to see their son, or to New York, or wherever it may be. I know there have been more than one instance, but the one I'm remembering the most is Mayapur. The mother of the guru came there, and despite the high position and the exalted seat given to her son, she still sees her son as her son. And the disciples, they may see their guru in the absolute position. However, a godbrother, that's a different story. The godbrother may praise the guru of a disciple, of a group of disciples in public, but in private, Sridhar Maharaj said, he may give him a slap. What does that mean? He may give him a slap. So he may disagree. But the etiquette is, he should not disagree in public because this will challenge and interfere with the faith of the disciple. So the disciple is in a very weak position. But the disciple should not remain in a weak position. This is not only the case in the Hare Krishna movement today worldwide, this is a case in everything worldwide. People have been dumbed down, they have been weakened, they don't know the history of their own country, they certainly don't know the history of the human race, they don't know the history of religion. Christianity is credited with establishing monotheism in the world. I mean, monotheism existed in the world tens of thousands of years before anybody ever even heard heard of a Jew, what to speak of a Christian. But, the narrative is dominated by Western historians who make everything Christian-centric, Eurocentric. Mesopotamia is the oldest civilization on earth, and all these things, and they have their pattern of establishing their truth, but their truth is actually a false truth. It's not the whole truth, and it's not complete. And then people are pretty much just educated fools all over the world. They don't know the truth on anything. And we see the same thing happening in the Hare Krishna movement. It's preached that the Guru is absolute. But this is false. This is not true. This is not Gaudiya-siddhanta. The position of the Guru, the position of the Acharya is relative, not absolute. Now, another thing I want to point out here is he mentions, prior to kind of focusing there, that whatever Prabhupada says, beware, Guru is the Acharya should not be taken into the relative plane. It's like he didn't have to be taken into the relative plane. The Guru is already in the relative plane. So what we have here is a misunderstanding of the position of Guru, relative and absolute. All right. So, but prior to that statement, he's made the statement here that what Prabhupada has said and done, this is sacred ground, this is sacred words, this is Puranic. This is Puranic. So let us agree with that, 100%. But then let's expand the curtain. Let's expand the lens view. Let's zoom out there a little bit and say, Bhaktisiddhanta, what he said and what he did is Puranic. It is sacred ground. Then let's go a little bit further. Bhaktivinoda, what he has said and what he has done, it is sacred ground, as good as Puranic. True or false? What would you say, Giri?
Definitely true.
If we accept that what Prabhupada has done is, or are we trying to say, well, yeah, they're acharyas, but you know what he did because he came to my neighborhood.
Amar Guru
Jagat Guru. You see,
Yeah.
that's another thing in Guru-tattva. Amar Guru Jagat Guru. I mean, it's undoubtable that Prabhupada's disciples and his further followers and subsequent generations have great love and appreciation for his divine grace. But I think what is forgotten is, guess what? The disciples of Bhakti-siddhanta, they had great love and appreciation for their spiritual master. And guess what? The disciples of Prabhupada's godbrothers, they had great love and they have great love for their spiritual master and appreciation for what he did. Is it only because Prabhupada came to our neighborhood in the Western world that therefore everybody else is relative?
That begs the question that if one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, for example, said, we did go to the moon, and he's a guru, and he has disciples, if the guru is absolute, then which statement is correct?
First off, we should understand that he's not talking about an absolute subject matter. He's not talking about the matter of the absolute truth. He's talking about this material world. For example, Prabhupada writes about Christo and Krishna and draws the comparison. And one article, I believe, is called Christ is Our Guru.
Yeah.
But if you're following scholarship in the world, you'll see that the very existence of Jesus Christ as a historical person is under heavy attack by the facts. Under heavy attack by the facts. And it turns out there is no historical proof that a person named, they've called Jesus Christ, ever walked this earth. Yet Prabhupada, Jesus is our guru. So how is a disciple to balance if it turns out historically, let's say it turns out in the Harvard Book of History or the Oxford Book of History, that Jesus never existed as a person as is described in the New Testament Bible? What if it turns out? And then history looks back at, and Prabhupada said, Jesus is our guru, but there never was a Jesus. So what would we do then if we were brought up through time and we were supposed to then explain that?
Right.
So let me say before I continue that a lot more is known now about the history of Christianity than was ever known to Srila Prabhupada and those before him in India, because the only access they had was the Christianity explained by the very Christians themselves. Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda both disappeared before the Nagamati library was discovered in Egypt in 1943, and the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, I believe, in Israel. Both of those revealing many things about Christianity that weren't hitherto known before. They weren't described before. So you cannot say that they knew everything about Christianity. They didn't. But running with the fact that that was the major religion of the British Empire and the major religion in the United States, etc., favorable things were said about Christianity. But what is it about Christianity that is, we find sometimes supported by Prabhupada in saying Jesus is our guru? What is it that is actually Vaishnava? And that's the ideal.
Self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
The die to live. The spirit of the preaching. And even if these things are all false, still, that character Jesus, he is our guru. On those counts. So even though the story may be false, like in Panchatantra has many stories and pretty much they're all false. Story of the blue jackal and the rabbit and the lion and all these. They're all false. Yet the message they carry is true. So you can have a false story and a truth within it.
A principle.
Right. Huh?
A principle within that, yeah.
A moral, something like that. So, but my point here is, if our Srila Prabhupada, our A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada, if his words and actions are as sacred ground as Puranas, then so must be the actions of Bhakti-siddhanta, the words of Bhakti-siddhanta, the actions and words of Bhaktivinoda, and all previous Acharyas. Or are you trying to say that Srila Prabhupada is superior to all Acharyas who came before him? I don't know. I think in some cases that's exactly what people are trying to say. Many devotees will quote the Puranic verse about the Senapati. The Senapati.
Chaitanya Mangal, yeah.
Chaitanya Mangal. However, they fail to recognize that this verse is written behind the deity on the wall in the Samadhi of Srila Bhakti-siddhanta.
Oh, that's the verse from Padma Purana, Hyut Kale Purushottamat.
That's right. He will come and unite all the Sampradayas.
In Purushottam Kshetra.
He is born in Purushottam Kshetra.
Yeah.
So, overlooking the achievements of others, then, wow, yes, Srila Prabhupada is the Senapati. He's the great general and so on and so forth. And that's not being argued here. So, is Srila Prabhupada being glorified, or is everything around him being minimized so that then he appears great? Is he great amongst the great, or have we just eliminated all the great personalities and therefore he is great? Anyway, the point here is in the Guru-tattva means the understanding Siddhanta and Gaudiya Vaishnavism of the position of Guru, the Acharya, as stated by Srila Sridhara Maharaj here, is relative, not absolute. So that's a major consideration, a very major consideration that needs to be looked at. Okay, the other thing I want to say here is the first thing he mentions. Although he says he agrees with some of my points or our points, he does not like my aggressive nature. So that's not the first time I've ever heard about that. It's not that I don't have any sweetmeats in my, in my tiffin, but yeah, I got some chilies too.
But you have to go to the chilies first to get to the sweetmeats.
Sweets come at the end of the meal. First, take your bitters. Do you take your bitters? Do you eat neem? Do you take your bitters? Or do you just go straight for the halava? Yeah. All right, so I want to point out, since he's pointed out that Prabhupada's Puranic sacred ground, Prabhupada was a firebrand. I mean, is that what we're trying to present now, that Prabhupada was some kind of world-trotting love bomber? You got to be kidding me. Prabhupada called a spade a spade. Are you ready for the fact that he said Africans were a species of gorilla and not humans? Are you ready for the fact that he said on a morning walk in Vrindavan that women should not even come to Vrindavan? No, all these things are being erased, and Prabhupada's just this so lovable man who just travels in the world and says so many nice things.
In that movie,
how much illicit sex has taken part in Vrindavan? Do you know that Prabhupada was not in favor of families coming to live in Vrindavan? Yet, do you know how many families live there? And do you know that some of these families, their children, or at least one that I know of, one, I hope not more, was murdered in Vrindavan? Do you know that? Do you know that Vrindavan is not a land of retirement for those people who cannot afford the economics of the United States, England, Australia, and other countries, or who have just escaped out of not Africa, Russia? Do you know that he wanted 25 sannyasis and 25 brahmacharis to be in charge of the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan? No, because all the things that can't or haven't succeeded, well, we just block those out from everyone's memory. So, and they're pretty much gone in most people's memory. There are so many things that devotees don't know. Yeah, and they're not nice things. But let me reflect back to the point again. Prabhupada wrote in his books that his godbrothers fought in the court. It's a little bit of a technical thing there. I think I asked you to look that up this morning, Giri.
That's his Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi 12:8. Yeah.
Chaitanya Charitamrita, he writes in a purport that his godbrothers fought in the courts and became asara. Asara means useless for fighting in the courts. Is that not aggressive speech? How many times has Srila Prabhupada spoken, recorded and available in the Bhaktivedanta tape ministry in audio format aggressively about things that he saw as destructive to the movement of Bhaktisiddhanta or as being failing in the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's even mentioned in the recent Hare Krishna film that was made by Yadubar Prabhu, which aired all over and is still showing in cinemas around the world. It is mentioned there at one point, and it shows a little clip of Prabhupada shouting into a microphone about the nonsense of this world, the nonsense and the deviation. I forget exactly what he was saying. But the commentator there who's being interviewed says Prabhupada was a fighter, not a love bomber. What do you say about scientists? Boot in face.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're all supposed to just sit back and be mellow Joes and hug everybody.
Well, that's by Prabhupada.
Huh?
I think there's a letter to Ridha from Srila Prabhupada where he says that Sai Baba is like Pondraka, we should chop off his head.
Yeah, okay. You go back to the time of Bhaktisiddhanta, he printed it. We have it.
Yeah.
We've quoted it in some of our articles on Krishna Talk on our website. We've quoted it from the magazine, printed magazine, distributed to the public. Bhaktisiddhanta calls out Bipin Bihari Goswami as by name, this Jati Gosai, Bipin Bihari, and declares him an enemy of the Vaishnava.
Of the Vaishnava community, yeah.
An enemy of the Vaishnava community. Who was this gentleman? He was the Diksha Guru of Bhaktivinoda. What, Bhaktisiddhanta didn't know that? He didn't know that Bipin Bihari, of course he knew. Of course he knew. And he called it out, that this Bipin Bihari, although having given Diksha to Bhaktisiddhanta, was a Sahajya and an enemy. And Bipin Bihari is not the only person that Bhaktisiddhanta ever called out in writing. All right? So this idea that you can establish the truth, and who's going to read that magazine at that time? Well, they didn't have the internet, but I bet you if he had the internet, he'd have been on it and he'd have been saying the same thing. So here on Let's Talk, we're not mentioning anybody's names, especially if it falls in the category of a negative thing, what they said or they did. We might mention someone's name, which when there's something good, and certainly there's been so much good in the world, and there continues to be so much good in the world, but that good is oftentimes being held up, drugged down, and interfered with by old school nonsense and misunderstandings that persist even to this day. So let's move on and say a few things. Goswami, did you want to say anything at this point, or do you want me to continue to lead this conversation this morning?
Let me say one thing, and that would be ISKCON seems to be in conflict with itself about this point of that Prabhu was mentioning in his comment to you about everything Prabhupada did, said, is Puranic. Because if that's the case, how do they possibly justify changing anything in the books? Right? I mean, they seem to be at war with themselves. They're not even in agreement on this point. You know?
Exactly. So it's unfortunate that, I've written, not hundreds of articles on this topic, but I've certainly written many, many articles addressing, without mentioning anybody, without being critical of anybody or anything, the fact that there are misunderstandings in the Hare Krishna movement. And I wanted to suggest at this point And we're live, and like I said, we live with whatever we do on this because it's live, it's there forever. Let's drop using this name of ISKCON, and because it's not just ISKCON, it's the Hare Krishna movement in the West. And let me give you an example. There's a group of devotees in Hawaii, which are very widespread in the world, but their base is Hawaii. They're not in ISKCON. They have, at one time, some of them were, but they're not. And they're very well known. They're very popular and very widespread. They're not ISKCON, but they are Hare Krishnas. They are in the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But they think that Lord Brahma became Lord Jesus Christ. And they substantiate this with a quote from Jesus and a quote from the Vedas about the life of Brahma. And they have, in many cases, Jesus on their altar along with Mahaprabhu, etc., etc. They also don't really worship Radha. They worship Krishna alone. They are fall bodies. They believe the jiva fell from eternal Leela. They propagate the holy name. Hands down, they have brought more people to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra than I have, by far. But in none of the cases have they given the people the right understanding of the Maha Mantra, the origin of the jiva, the proper way to worship Krishna. You know, when I hear that Lord Brahma became Jesus Christ and got nailed to a cross, I really laugh on that one. I bet you Lord Brahma doesn't step outside the Sampradaya again, huh? You gotta stay close to home. So, it's not just ISKCON. In fact, you know, we have had, and maybe still do, but certainly in the past, we have had people in our little mission, and they also had some off-the-rail thinking about rasa-tattva, or so many things. There are also people who are not in ISKCON, and who claim that, and some of these people are even so-called followers of Sridhara Maharaj. They claim that Bhaktivinoda's the Jaiva Dharma is simply a novel, and that the Siddhanta on the Tatastha Jiva, which is in greatest detail in Jaiva Dharma more than anywhere else, they say Bhaktivinoda just made the whole thing up.
Preaching strategy.
It's preaching strategy. And asked, well, why did Sridhara Maharaj reiterate the same thing when he was certainly a deep, free-thinking individual? They reply by saying, well, he was just carrying the party line. And when I heard that, I just had to laugh, you know, I really had to laugh. And later we came upon a story, just to mention that now, before we go on to other things. And Sridhara Maharaj was saying once, we were sitting in a room talking with Bhakti-siddhanta. Of course, in those days, they didn't have tape recorders, remember? And they're sitting in a room talking to Bhakti-siddhanta, and the magnificence of Jaiva Dharma came up. And one senior disciple there, Bhakti-siddhanta, he said that this is just the most amazing, that he's written and invented this story, but within this story, he's taken the Siddhanta of Mahaprabhu, and he's explained it so elegantly. But the story itself isn't true. And then Sridhara Maharaj requested permission to speak. And remember, Bhakti-siddhanta is sitting right there. And they listened to this first disciple, his praise of Bhaktivinoda. It's full of praise. Remember, it's full of praise. Then Sridhara Maharaj spoke, and he praised the praises of this devotee and his praise of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. But then he said, but I beg to differ, that what Bhaktivinoda is given in Jaiva Dharma is not a fanciful creation of his imagination, but these events happened in another time, in another place. And Bhaktivinoda has brought this down. It is true, it is reality, just like the stories in the Upanishads are true, and they are reality, both in substance, the teaching, as well as these events are not a novel, a creation, a fiction, but the truth in the fiction. No, the stories actually happen. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta spoke and very much appreciated the comment of Srila Sridhara, that indeed, yes, this is what we have in the writings of Bhaktivinoda. He has brought down both the Siddhanta and the stories. They are not no part other, left or right, is a fanciful creation of his imagination. Yet some Prabhupada disciples say that it's a novel. One prominent guru in the Hare Krishna movement in Eastern Europe wrote a book of imaginary leelas of Radha and Krishna. And when he was asked by his godbrothers, well, how can you do that? He said, well, yeah, these things happened in my mind, kind of like they happened in the mind of Bhaktivinoda when he wrote Jaiva Dharma. So he was saying Jaiva Dharma is, these things just happened in his mind. They're not really true, but the meaning is true. So yes, I've written stories about Radha Krishna. They only happened in my imagination, but what I'm saying about them is true. So if you don't understand, and I've been saying for years that it's not maybe, it's definitely in a future kalpa, you will find Jaiva Dharma and parts of it as an Upanishad. For our modern age, it is an Upanishad. And it is the basis of the Gaudiya-siddhanta. Well, not the total basis. Mahaprabhu, of course, the sixth Goswami is the basis. But in modern times, Bhaktivinoda is the seventh Goswami, and what he has said there is not imagination in any sense. In any sense. But what importance is given to that today? Almost none in the West. Particularly inside the main frame of the Hare Krishna movement, and in many of its branches. Not explained, not understood. What?
I remember you saying before that there's a tendency amongst many devotees, especially, well, just everybody actually, amongst many devotees, that the older the Acharya, the older the books, the more importance it has, and the more contemporary the Acharya and the books, it's of less importance.
Yes, until you get to the most contemporary devotees, and they will say, so you have both things. You have the old school, I know who you're thinking of, and we're not going to mention names here, in Vrindavan, will, jump right over. For that gentleman, prominent, for that gentleman, he just skipped right over. Prabhupada is just a Hindu preacher. It's of no consequence. Then they leapfrog and over Bhaktisiddhanta is not even bona fide. And thus Prabhupada is not even bona fide. And then they just completely dismiss Bhaktivinoda, and they want to draw all their conclusions from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur backwards, six Goswamis.
The core scriptures. Huh? The core scriptures, as they call them.
They call them the core scriptures. So all the saints lived in the past, today there are none, etc., etc. But
yeah.
We find that many great personalities have disagreed with this young gentleman, so we don't really take him that seriously, although, you know what? Hundreds of devotees do, maybe even thousands by now. In fact, this individual took away one of the Hare Krishna gurus from, hate to mention it again, from ISKCON, back in the, I think it was the late 90s, or late 90s, because he didn't have better information, because controversy is avoided, because aggressive preaching is prohibited, and everybody just, let's have a big kirtan, take prachadam, hari hari bol. This guru in ISKCON with, I believe he had at least more than 50 disciples, he wasn't one of the big ones. He was diverted from this group in Vrindavan. He left his position. He took his disciples with him. He joined with that group from Vrindavan. And he wrote a letter excusing himself from the grace of Srila Prabhupada, saying it was very nice that Prabhupada came and, he gave Hare Krishna and everything. And basically he called Prabhupada a good Hindu. But he wanted to know the truth. He wanted to know the truth of the Siddhanta. And part of the thing he wanted to know was the truth about the origin of the jiva. That was a big one in his mind. And when he was shown by these people who reject Prabhupada and reject Bhaktisiddhanta, and reject Bhaktivinoda, but he was shown through the works of the 6 Goswamis, sorry, the jiva does not fall from Goloka Vrindavan or any Vaikuntha planet. The jivas originate in the marginal plane with the Tatastha Shakti. And then there were so many other things involving the mantras of the Hare Krishna movement. How many people chant chant Gayatri in the Hare Krishna movement worldwide, Giri Goswami? How many people? Tens of thousands?
Thousands.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands. But if you ask them about their mantras, they'll be stuck. Because they don't know where this Guru Gayatri, Guru mantra came from. And then they'll be shown that in the books of Dhyana Chandra and others, a different Guru mantra, Guru Gayatri, is given. So, in fact, the opposition camp there in Vrindavan says the reason the Gurus fall down is you have the wrong Guru mantras, you have the wrong Guru Gayatri. And this particular guru in ISKCON not being able to defend against any of these arguments, well, he must have been a very weak faith and whatnot, but he was a disciple of Prabhupada, and then he converted to this group and took over 300, 400 people with him. And that was 20 years ago. God only knows how much they've spread this idea now that the people in the Hare Krishna movement have the wrong gurus. So, we've been seeing these things go on for so long. And yes, we've written articles and we've bided our time, but the fact is, someone's got to raise their voice in the mob to get people to pay attention. And yes, some people will come to this various information and they will misunderstand it like they misunderstand every information. But back to your point, Goswami, if Prabhupada's, this is a good point. I encourage my friend, if he happens to listen to this video, you should make this point with those people they're not changing, they already did it, who have changed Srila Prabhupada's books, and in many ways, in a way that is whatever, it's not important, but they've changed also Srila Prabhupada's books in significant ways, actually changing the meaning of what he's saying, giving a little twist to the wording so that it favors society consciousness. I said many times because the leaders of the Hare Krishna movement do not understand the position of an Acharya, the position of Guru in relation to not just relative and absolute, but so many things within that. Therefore, they have allowed the Ritviks to flourish. They have never defeated the Ritviks. Mm-hmm. And I further add to that, because they have failed to misunderstand the actual position of the Acharya, of Guru, in terms of Gaudiya-siddhanta and Guru-tattva, they are covered Ritviks themselves.
Right.
Now, without getting excited, keeping a smile on my face, without being aggressive, I will tell you that they do not follow and they are not situated in the Guru-tattva. They are covered Ritviks in the same way, now listen close, in the same way the Shankaracharya is not a theist. He is a covered Buddhist. Now, where will you find this? Well, you probably won't find this mentioned in any of Prabhupada's books or any of Prabhupada's lectures, but he did, because he did not cover the point of the Ritviks. But you will find this in the writings of Keshav Maharaj, you will find this in the writings of Bhakti-siddhanta, and you will find this definitely in our parampara. So, failing to understand the truth of the Guru-tattva, the vast majority of the Hare Krishna gurus today happen to be in that institution that we should not mention henceforth, are covered Ritviks themselves. And because they're covered Ritviks, they've never been able to fully actually defeat the Ritvik understanding. So Guru-tattva, a very important principle. And Goswami was pointing this out, that Guru-tattva is the first tattva in the Gaudiya Kantahar. And then I realized that, yeah, that's a fact. And it's also the first word, where's the camera there? It's the first tattva in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is, of course, English translation. I'm terrible at Bengali. I'm more terrible at Sanskrit. And I'm pretty terrible at English, but I can read chapter 1, the spiritual masters. What's that? That's Guru-tattva. That's not first chapter. If you want to understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you got to understand the Guru-tattva. That brings us to, where's the book again? Here, the Panchatattva. Panchatattva is so important in the Hare Krishna movement. I mean, is there any deity? Is there anything more important? I don't think so. In one sense, no. It's the threshold. There are other things to do with the deities, but it's paramount importance. And if you discuss Guru-tattva in the Panchatattva with most Hare Krishna people around the world, what will they say? They'll say that Mahaprabhu is both Radha and Krishna. They'll say that
Nityananda's Balaram.
No. Oh, that's right. Nityananda is Balaram, and Advaita is Mahavishnu. Then Gadadhar Pandit is, what's the common reference? Radharani.
Yep.
Radharani. And Srivas Pandit, Narada Muni. Yep. So when discussing Narada Muni, he's a general conception of Guru. Some people have understood that. When discussing Lord Nityananda, of course, he is Lord Balaram, and Lord Balaram is what? Guru-tattva. However, the discussion kind of thins out there and doesn't get complete. Because in the Guru-tattva, Lord Balaram is only Guru for Vatsalya, Sakya, and Dasya, and what depends on how you conversation it, Shantaras. He is not Guru-tattva for the Madhurya Ras. And being that Nityananda is Balaram, he's Guru-tattva, but he's not Guru-tattva of the Madhurya Ras. So who is? Well, you can kind of catch it in the purports of Srila Prabhupada, but he did not focus on these things. I mean, let's grow up and be grown men, at least in some regards, and think that everything there was to cover, and in its depth and greatest detail, that Srila Prabhupada did that. That's foolish. He did not. He himself did not complete the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? He didn't complete the 10th canto, which is the whole purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He wasn't able to communicate that to us. That doesn't mean he didn't have it himself, understand it or realize it or in that position, but he was not able to give everything in its greatest detail in a short 12. What's 12 years nowadays? Some people wait 4 or 5 years for initiation. What's 12 years? And that was starting from the roughest and rawest material up to the departure of his divine grace. I mean, it's a miracle beyond miracles that he was able to give and explain all that he did. So they say that, the radio you can only broadcast what it can receive. So the guru can only give what the disciples can receive. If he gives more, it just goes right over their head anyway. So instead of people looking at it and saying, oh, you're minimizing Prabhupada, I'd say, no, you're very mistaken. I'm minimizing you. I'm minimizing me. I'm minimizing us. And had we been of the quality of disciples that Bhakti-siddhanta had, like Srila Sridhara Maharaj, Srila Puri Maharaj, Keshav Maharaj, Yajabarnath Maharaj, and all these other extremely great personalities and bona fide pure devotees, according to Srila Prabhupada also. Had he had disciples of that caliber, well, we might have seen his divine grace go into much more depth and detail. But even that is questionable. That is also questionable. Because every guru, every acharya throughout time doesn't always go into the greatest detail and the greatest depth in all of this. They come in and establish that as what is most necessary for the time. And in the time of Srila Prabhupada, it was not only to spread Krishna consciousness around the world, it was to spread it around India, who had pretty much turned their back completely, even in Bengal, turned their back on the teaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So by his grace, his divine grace, it is now everywhere. You can't find a place on the map that doesn't have some hoo-ha going on about Hare Krishna. But that does not mean that there isn't contributions by others, or that the depth is maybe deeper than many of us know. And it's because of, I make this point, because of a lack of understanding and a prominence in misunderstanding that many of the problems exist today that we have in the Hare Krishna world. And if they exist still while Prabhupada's living disciples are present, what do you think is going to happen 50 years after we're all dead and gone from this world? What do you think is going to happen then? When you've got a couple of biography books, you've got a few books of Prabhupada memorabilia, you've got Prabhupada disciples writing fiction stories, you've got Prabhupada disciples saying Bhaktivinoda invented this philosophy. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to be the situation, the condition there? So I was watching this documentary about something to do with cancer the other day, and it was just this one little clip, and the doctor is going to some intrusive observation or something he's doing. This person, he says, now I just want to inform you, this is going to hurt a little bit. So sometimes the truth hurts. But to quote, Jeremy Corsi, who's a patriot freedom fighter in the current internet revolution going on in the United States about politics, he basically said the other day, if you don't like what I'm saying, turn it off. You don't have to watch. We live in a free world. You don't want to listen, turn it off. So, unfortunately, I cannot just become a beautiful, sweet-smelling daisy in the field, just some lovey-dovey old grandpa type of guru, preacher, whatever. I am what I am. So, if you don't like it, take a hike. I'm sure many people won't even bother to tune in, so we don't have to worry about all this stuff. Okay, let's go back to the sweet part. Position of the Acharya, relative and absolute. According to great realized personalities and pure devotees like Swami B.R. Sridhara Maharaj of Navadvip, the position of the Acharya is relative, not absolute. Therefore, a disciple may have to discern relative statements like, okay, he makes the example about, Prabhupada said we didn't go to the moon, but and then people doubted that, even disciples doubted that. There were two devotees, I can't remember their names, they actually left the movement at that time. Too difficult to digest. 50 years later, we're finding out that, maybe they didn't go. And many people, not just Hare Krishnas and Prabhupada, are saying it. Right? Well, what about the statement of Balavanta will be the President of the United States?
Well, what about the statement
Balavanta is still here. So maybe Balavanta, if you're watching, are you an insurance salesman who's running politics and Tulsi Gabbard, now there's a reality. Okay, Tulsi Gabbard, those of you who know or don't know, Tulsi Gabbard is a Vaishnavi, a disciple of Siddhasarupananda Goswami from Hawaii, who is a disciple of Prabhupada, who is outside of the mainframe of the Hare Krishna movement, and she's a congresswoman for Hawaii, and she's a member of the Democratic Party, and her name pops up all the time as a possibility to be on the 2020 elections for the next presidential run in the United States, either as woman candidate for the presidency or vice president. So, but Prabhupada said Balavanta, so okay. Maybe
well, there's other problematic statements as well. The dinosaurs, I have not seen anything that does not exist.
That was a very good one. That was a beautiful one. And Prabhupada says,
women having 32 ounce brain.
Prabhupada is fighting atheism. Did you say fighting? I did. He was fighting atheism. Huh? They say God doesn't exist. Boom. He's got, I saw him today. I saw him this morning, he's fighting boot on head, your science. And now science has made a huge turn towards accepting consciousness as not just a reality, the ultimate reality. As the cause of the universe. Consciousness. Huh? So, of course, the diehards are still there. But, what was I lost the point there. What was?
It really brings up the difference between.
Oh yeah, the dinosaurs. So he said, I have not read this in Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai Prabhupada, and he asked the devotees, oh yeah, the scientists are putting all those bones out there, It's about 5 years ago they finally found those dinosaur eggs and remains in Gujarat, fossilized.
Yeah, worshipped as Shiva lingas.
They were being worshipped as Shiva lingas. Yeah. So I wrote an article, I can't remember the name of it, it's there on Krishna Talk. And
but it was about the Makara.
It was about the Makara.
Yeah.
Now, the Makara, and there was an article also about the Timangila, and how in modern times, since the last 20 years, they've found fossilized remains of what truly could be the Makara, which was a what do they call, predator fish in the primal oceans of this world, as well as the Timangila. That's quite common today. They're called megalodons. You can see their teeth. In fact, I have one of them over here in my fossil collection. Anyway, I found out a verse in Bhagavatam where I said, I think I actually have found a verse in Bhagavatam which describes the dinosaurs. And this was a verse that described a great battle that took place. And these Kshatriyas, there was demons and devas facing off on each side, a great battle. And it describes them going into battle, not just on chariots with horses, riding lizards, riding frogs, flying on birds. It's like, stop. Let your imagination run wild. There's Arjuna, who's said to be about 14 or 15 feet tall, riding on the back of a gecko lizard. How big was that gecko? At a 14-foot tall man, he must have weighed well over 1,500 pounds. So how big was that lizard he was riding on? How big were the birds that other Kshatriyas were riding on? And snakes and all these things, they rode into battle. Think dinosaurs. I don't know. So, Prabhupada's statement is, I have not read in Srimad Bhagavatam. All right? Well, guess what? Radharani's name is not in Srimad Bhagavatam either. So, should we believe the Madhvas and say that there is no Radharani? The Madhva Sampradaya said there is no Radharani? And if there was, she's just a celestial prostitute? No, you want to... Oh, and that's another example. Years ago, the Hare Krishna movement at Mayapur was under serious attack from the Madhva Sampradaya for 2 continuous years. They were beating down our Sampradaya. The Madhva Sampradaya was beating down the Gaudiya Sampradaya in the modern ISKCON Hare Krishna world. And after 2 years, we got a request from a GBC if it was possible if we could add to, if there's anything we knew that might come to our rescue. And so you'll know about this even better than I, because I was in the United States at the time, and Giri Maharaj, you and Vishnu Maharaj, and at my request, got into this debate with the Madhvas and established our Sampradaya beyond any doubt. Our mantras, our books, our Acharyas, our Siddhanta established everything because we knew the history and we knew how to meet fire with fire. Remember? Now, all that is recorded on our website, and it just so happens that one of the teachers in Mayapur, who in previous years have done the courses for the Bhakti, Vaibhav, Bhaktivinoda, they have these different courses.
Shastri.
Huh?
Bhakti Shastri, I think.
Bhakti Shastri. When it gets to the point about our connection with the Madhva Sampradaya, etc., he refers his students to that whole debate that we had with the Madhvas establishing our Sampradaya as a bona fide branch of the Brahma Madhva, as the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradayas. But the leaders of their movement couldn't do this. They couldn't do it because they didn't have the ammunition. And we were drawing mostly from our previous acharyas like Bhakti-siddhanta, Bhaktivinoda, and current acharyas, most current acharyas, such as Srila, Srila Maharaj, Srila Puri Maharaj, and others. And you and Vishnu Maharaj, and it's recorded, you drove them to the wall till they admitted in their own words, they said, we're speechless. We don't know what to say. We pointed out that there was, what was it? They said your acharyas quote books, and they put their finger on about 25 books that don't exist.
Right.
You're a previous acharyas. You quote, even your Prabhupada. You quote books to support Mahaprabhu as in avatar. These books don't exist. We can't find these books. These books don't exist anywhere. And then we pointed out that Madhvacharya quotes over 200 books. Over 200 books that can't be found today, that don't exist. And we also introduced the concept, I can't remember if we introduced the Sattvata Samhitas. What is that? What is the Sattvata Samhita? Where's that book? Well, there are some books, but what that refers to is the eternal plane where the Vedas and all these books exist eternally. And some of our acharyas have access to that plane. And Sridhar Maharaj himself once said, you will have to go to the plane of eternal truth, and you will have to knock, and you will have to beg admittance there. And admitted there, you will know everything. So, yeah. But because they don't know these things, they don't know how to argue, they don't know their own histories, they don't know the greater histories, they don't place any importance on these previous acharyas. They were being tranched for 2 years non-stop. Okay, when this was over, this was then presented to the GBC at the time. And one of the GBCs, I believe it's the one who was a lady, I forget her name, her and another GBC, there were two of them, they presented this is what's gone down. The Narasingha Maharaj and his disciples have stopped this incessant criticism, not just stopped them, but they've defeated them. He's defended ISKCON, he's defended our parampara, he has defeated these attackers, and then she suggested that some sort of recognition or reward would be appreciated, should be coming forth from ISKCON in appreciation for their works. Well, the response was, yes, we appreciate that, but you see, being that he's not in ISKCON, we can't give them any credit. That story I can tell at least 4 or 5 more times. But we have come to their rescue, and after we have saved them on a particular situation regarding the proper history or the proper philosophy, it's like, it's kind of like they look at use a thorn to remove a thorn. So, but maybe it's not exactly like that. But they do discard the thorn, whatever. So we're a thorn. So this broadcast is probably just going to be yet another thorn in the... But sometimes, have you ever seen them move the buffaloes in Vrindavan out in the fields, They got the buffaloes plowing the field, and they have these guys with a stick. Well, go close and look. At the end of that stick is a nail. It's about a 1/4 inch long. And the old buff, he don't want to move because they had to make a turn at the end of the field real sharp. So they don't just hit him. They stab him in the ass with that little bit of a nail, and that buffalo, whoop! So years ago, I made some outrageous statement on the internet when it was first beginning in some talk group. And immediately these defenders from somewhere in Texas, some Hindu boys, they jumped to it, right? And they issued a counter challenge, you know. So I wrote back and said, well, now that I have your attention. So sometimes we, you know, what do they say? Squeaky wheel gets the oil. So it's been suggested that God brothers, you know, should meet. We should talk in private about these things. Well, I'm open for that. In fact, the GBC was just visiting me here, the Krishna Bhakti Ashram here in Mexico, a couple weeks ago. And he suggested the same thing. But the problem is he's been suggesting this for about, that I can remember, about 15 years. He's even brought it up to friends and like-minded persons at Mayapur every year, but never seems to happen. Never seems to happen. So, guess what? There are people that are interested, and you know, there are other people. There are people in the world. They also they appreciate a little aggression. Also, aggression is fine so long as it's not. What do you call it? It is not backed by enviousness.
Yeah.
Or hatred.
It's not personal. Yeah.
Or, you know, personal attacks. And I have to say, if you think that just sitting by and watching the Hare Krishna movement become a Hindu version, a Krishna version of the Ramakrishna mission, that this is even tolerable by any disciple of Prabhupada, I don't think so. When you actually see and address the facts, I was pointing out early this morning, that Prabhupada had approximately 5,000 disciples. And yes, a few hundred of us have already left this world. As recently as God Brother Mathiladish Prabhu departed from this world last week. He was a well-known disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Spent most of his devotional career on the West Coast in Los Angeles and other places. He passed away. Well, if you add all of us who have passed away, there's only a couple hundred. Okay, then you add every disciple of Prabhupada who is truly an initiated, even first, whether speak of first and second disciple of Prabhupada, who is active in one of Prabhupada's temples around the world, you'll be hard-pressed to find 150 people. Most of them you'll find in Vrindavan, but they're living outside, not really doing full service and all this. Find people who are Prabhupada's disciples living in temples doing full-time 24/7 service. You can't find 150 of them. I know in Bombay, one of the biggest temples in the world, there's one. Bhima Prabhu is in charge of the BBT. So add that, say there's 200 of them, add the 100 that have died, or say there's 200 that have died. Where are the 4,600 of them? Where are they? Interesting story. Interesting story. And why are they not? Oh, right, I read the report. They weren't sincere, they weren't serious, they were in Maya, they all blooped. You watch CNN news? More fake news, more fake propaganda. There's a reason for all this. And you know what? If the second generation doesn't understand how the first generation deviated, how they made their mistakes, what those mistakes are, and correct them themselves, they will go yet further down the road of deviation, misconception, and that fear of Sridhara Maharaj may one day be written into the history books. Sampradaya. How many parts of the Hare Krishna movement have already become Sampradaya through Siddhanta and crazy activities? And if you don't put up the dam now, if you don't build the wall now, then what do you think is going to happen in the future? You'll just have another version of the Ramakrishna mission. And that includes eating chicken is fine. The Murgi mission, remember?
Yeah.
Prabhupada criticized the Murgi mission. He once wrote us a letter and said, there are no Christians anywhere in the world. Thou shalt not kill. And he dismissed all Christians who were not vegetarians as not being Christians. His divine grace was an aggressive preacher. He wasn't a love bomber. Of course, he was like the chutney. So sweet you can't resist it, so hot you can't stand it. Well, I don't have the sweetness nor the fire of Srila Prabhupada. I don't try to compare myself in any way to his divine grace. But I will not deny the fact that I'm a disciple of his divine grace, and I find it intolerable to just sit back, say nothing, do nothing, and watch a bunch of deviants massacre the greatest legacy of Prabhupada, which is his books. So all you people out there who are, anti-book change, please stay tuned to this channel because we're going to detail some of that stuff. This is the most outrageous deviation yet. But just simply preserving the books won't be enough. We have to preserve not just the books, but what's in the books. And we have to preserve that in the living concept of the devotees. Just like the Sikhism today, Sikh religion. Granth Sahib, the book of the Sikhs. It's a terrific book. The name of Krishna and Govinda is mentioned in there over 1,000 times. They wants to chant japa the name, sing the bhajans, the name. So many good things are in there. But then who reads that book amongst the Sikhs? Nobody. Practically nobody. It's like the Bible. Yeah, there's some good things in the Bible. Who reads the Bible? Not 1 in 100 Christians reads the Bible. Or they read the same things over and over and over.
Yeah.
Pick
and choose.
Huh? What's that?
Pick and choose.
What?
Pick and choose.
Pick and choose.
Yeah.
All right, so we go back to this Guru-tattva. First tattva in the Gaudiya Cantar is Guru-tattva. Goswami, how many verses was that? Did you look that up this morning?
Yeah, 64.
Interesting. 64 verses. I love that number, 64, right? 64 verses of the Guru-tattva. First chapter, Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's about the spiritual masters. That means Guru-tattva. And what is the second chapter? So it's been suggested that it will be appreciated and it will be more profound if we can quote verses to support the various things we are saying. So anybody who knows me personally knows I'm terrible at Sanskrit. I'm terrible at quoting verses while speaking. Very bad at that. Even terrible, just terrible. And the articles that we present, we have many, many verses. So, Giri Maharaj, I'll be looking to you from time to time. And I want to bring out this verse, Namashreshtam verse. But before, I want to set a little stage for that. So, once upon a time, back in the early 1980s, devotees were coming to... many devotees were coming for the darshan, particularly around the time of Gaur Purnima festival, the darshan of Srila Sridhara Maharaj over there in Koladunga, Navadvip, across the Ganges. And at one of these particular darshans, the topic of the substance and the meaning of ISKCON rose up as the focus. And Srila Sridhara Maharaj quoted a verse which he stated was the essence of the Hare Krishna movement, of our Prabhupada's preaching, and the essence of ISKCON. Am I correct on that, Gary?
Yep.
I'm summarizing. So please, read that verse to us. Go ahead and rattle off the Sanskrit there. Tell us where that verse is from, and read that verse.
The verse is from Mukta Charita by Raghunath Das Goswami. And the verse goes, Nama Shreshtam Manamapi Sachi Putramatra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagajam Urupurim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Giripo Homohoradika Madhavasham Krapto Yasya Kritila Kripaya Shri Gurun Tandatosmi.
All right, so this verse by Raghunath Das Goswami.
Mm-hmm. So the translation given by Srila Sridhar Maharaj for this verse is, I am fully indebted to Sri Gurudev. Why? Because he has given me so many matchless gifts. What is that? He has given me the highest conception of the holy name of Krishna, the highest form of sound, which contains the highest form of thought, aspiration, ideal, everything. He has given me my Diksha mantra, which contains a particular kind of meditation for my heart's inner fulfillment. And he has given me the service of Sri Sachinandana, the son of Mother Sachi. My Gurudev has brought me in connection with the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's favorite personal assistant, Sri Surup Damodar, the representative of Lalita Devi, the dearest friend of Srimati Radharani. My Gurudev has brought me in connection with Srila Rupa Goswami, the head of our Sampradaya, who was personally selected by Mahaprabhu to distribute Bhakti Ras, the highest mellow sweetness of spontaneous devotion, Raganuga Bhakti. My Gurudev has given me the connection of Srila Sanatana Goswami, who adjusts our position in relation to Raganuga Bhakti by giving us Sambandha Gyan, or the knowledge of what is what, and a proper acquaintance with the environment of pure devotion. My Gurudev has given me Mathura Mandal and Sri Vrindavan, where Radha and Govinda eternally perform their loving pastimes. In the transcendental land of all the forests, creepers, shrubs, every grain of sand, the hills, the water, everything bears the remembrance of Radha Krishna Leela. I am now becoming acquainted with the association of those cowherd people of Vrindavan, their nature and their feelings of love for Krishna. My Gurudev has given me the acquaintance of Radha Kund, the favorite place of Radha Govinda for their pastimes, and this great Govardhan hill. Last but not least, my Gurudev has given me the great hope that one day I may be accepted into the confidential camp of servitors who are always eagerly serving the lotus feet of Radha Madhava Sundar. All these inconceivable, matchless gifts are given to me by my Gurudev. Therefore, I bow down to his lotus feet.
Beautiful. Really nice. So Raghunath Das Goswami wrote that verse 400 and something years ago. Sridhar Maharaj then quotes this verse as the, as the quintessence of what is ISKCON. Now, make note, at the end, matchless gifts. He calls all the above and everything thus explained which comes to us through Gurudev as matchless gifts. There can be nothing to equal this. There can be nothing greater than this. These are matchless gifts. Now hold that thought for a minute. Just remember, just remember first temple of Srila Prabhupada in New York City was called Matchless Gifts. So what were those gifts? Just chapatis, rice, and dal? Okay. Okay, the holy name of Krishna. And we start adding to the list. Well, if you want the whole list, this is the verse. And a uniqueness of this verse is, the verse is all about Guru, 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 Guru is giving me all these things. This is what the Guru comes to give. This is what the Guru offers to us, gives us access to. And so we look at this and go, fully applicable to Prabhupada. But the question wasn't, what did Prabhupada come to give us? It was about the essence of ISKCON. So he has created, Srila Prabhupada has created this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That's such a beautiful name in itself, very international, very modern. But these are the gifts within it. So this is the quintessence of Guru, and this is also the quintessence, the quintessential meaning of the question, what is ISKCON? What is ISKCON? This is ISKCON. All right, so the devotees in the darshan, they were very happy to hear this. Well, there's a little bit of further history. That day, the next day, devotees returned across the river at the Mayapur Chandadoya Mandir, and this reference of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, this recorded reference was shared with one of the top 5 prominent leaders in the Hare Krishna movement at the time. So I think this is like 1982 or 81, more like 81, not sure of the year. And it was shared with him. And after hearing this beautiful explanation of what is ISKCON, that one of those supreme leaders of the movement at the time at Chandradoya Mandir said, that is not ISKCON. ISKCON is book distribution. Whatever. And you wonder, well, we don't wonder, we know why. So, and if you ask people, what is ISKCON? Well, it's Hare Krishna, it's a couple of things, and well, what's your book distribution? Book distribution. That is heralded from, it started in around 1972 up to the present day. Book distribution. If you can distribute books, it doesn't really matter what else you can do or do. That's great. That's great. That's great. So what are the books about? Well, that becomes secondary. And why change them? Then it becomes even worse. So, is it possible to sit back and say, oh, everything is dandy. Everything is just sweet. No, why get excited? Everything is, what?
Nothing has changed.
That was a very, that was good through the 80s into the 90s. Nothing has changed. Every year at the Tirubhava Prabhupada, nothing has changed. Swarup Damodar, Swami, God bless his soul, from the very beginning he used to raise the point that no, so many things have changed. This was only in the first 2 years. And he was pulled aside and told, stop saying that. Stop saying that. It's like government today. I've heard some of the revolutionary speakers say, government just assumes we're all idiots. We're all children. We can't digest the facts. We can't digest the past. We can't really deal with the truth. Just give us, we're all just a bunch of idiots. Just give us a lollipop to suck on, Give us puris and sweet rice and a big feast and honey bowl and give us a hug and everything's fine. But then everything isn't fine. It isn't fine till people wake up. So what we're talking about is, as we go forward, and we're not finished with Guru-tattva either. We've just barely touched the tip of the iceberg of what is Guru-tattva and what is not understood about Guru-tattva. But these are two important things. Is the Guru absolute or relative? In most of the Hare Krishna movement, they say he's absolute. And this is not the proper Siddhanta. And we have heard from Srila Maharaja on this today. The Guru's position is relative, and the disciple's position is also relative. Here's a mistake that so many people make. They go into a Gaudiya Mat, and they say, Prabhupada said, and the people in there, like they went to Sridhara Maharaj, right? And the GBC from the BBT that particular year said, we're publishing, listen carefully, we're publishing the Brahma Samhita with commentary by Srila Bhakti-siddhanta. And they did. And Sridhara Maharaj leaned forward and said, Guru Maharaj, Bhakti-siddhanta, he never wrote a commentary to Brahma Samhita. So that group of devotees and that GBC and BBT trustee went back to Mayapur and said, can you imagine? We have the book. We have it right here, Bhakti-siddhanta's commentary. He's denying his own guru. He's saying he's envious of Bhakti-siddhanta. That's what happens when you don't know the real truth of anything.
Means they had the book from 1932.
They had the book. Well, actually, they ended up having the book from 1974 that Yati Maharaj published, which was a version of the Brahma Samhita that Prabhupada said after my Guru's departure, they changed the Brahma Samhita. So the BBT published the book that Prabhupada criticized, and they published it as being the purports of Srila Bhakti-siddhanta. Well, there are two defects here. One is this was a Brahma Samhita that had been changed, and Prabhupada was not appreciating the changes. In the 1933 edition, there is an introduction by Bhakti-siddhanta in English, and then there's the verses, translations, and purports However, those translations, verses, and purports are not done by Bhaktisiddhanta. They're done by Nishikant Sanyal and I believe two other disciples of
Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj.
And Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj. They did the verse translations, purports. Translations, the purports are actually summary purports of Jiva Goswami's Sanskrit purports. And Bhaktisiddhanta didn't write the translations or any part of the purports. The purports are there are an English translation of Bhaktivinoda's summary translation of Jiva Goswami. That's the Brahma Samhita. So later, years later, I went through verse by verse, not once, 5 times. I crawled through every single verse and every single word of the purport in the 1974, which was redone in the 80s by the BBT, and the original one, 1933. And I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked. I couldn't even find a comma, a capital or a small case letter. There was nothing changed. It was absolutely Xerox copy, the same book. So what did Prabhupada mean when he said they changed the books? Well, one day I bothered to compare, because both books had an introduction by Bhaktisiddhanta, the 33 edition, and I just assumed it's the same introduction. But when I went through it line by line, voila, a whole paragraph disappeared. And that paragraph was the paragraph that gave credit to who had translated and who had printed this book for the Gaudiya Math Brahma Samhita. In that paragraph, Nishikant Sanyal and Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj are given the credits. So it was during the court case fighting and things that when a certain branch of the Gaudiya Math wanted to reproduce this book, and they did it, I guess, before they did their 74 edition in English, that they did other editions, and they removed this part of the introduction, which gave credit to those who had actually translated. So when Sridhara Maharaj said, oh, my Guru Maharaj did not write commentary to Bhakti Brahma Samhita, he was telling you the absolute, not absolute, but he was telling you the historical fact. Mm-hmm. And to this day, people just still think that Bhaktisiddhanta wrote the purports. Jiva Goswami wrote the purports, Bhaktivinoda wrote a summary of the purports, and Nishikant Sanyal and Pradeep Tirtha translated the summary purports of Bhaktivinoda. That's who wrote the purports of the present day modern edition of the Brahma Samhita. But instead of going back to a 1933 edition, they printed the 1974 edition, which included the omission, the very thing that Prabhupada criticized. So what's that? Where does that leave you? You don't understand. You think, oh, the language of Bhaktisiddhanta is so high. That's the language of Sanyal.
But if Srila Prabhupada criticized him taking that paragraph out, just that paragraph, what would he say about the book changes they're making to his books now?
Well, here's a good book change for you. Somewhere in the 90s, the history of book distribution was written by a combination, I think, of prominent devotees in Europe at the time. The history of book distribution, you know. In the name of Sripad Tripurari Maharaj, who Prabhupada called the incarnation of book distribution, and as an individual did more to get people out of their chairs and out there with a determination never ever seen before of this type to get out there and distribute by hook and by crook, whatever, but to get people out there and distribute Prabhupada's books, earned him the recognition by his divine grace as the incarnation of book distribution. But when the leaders of the 1990s Hare Krishna movement wrote the book, The History of Book Distribution, well, they didn't even mention Tripurari Maharaj.
Because he's not in there.
Well, because he was not in this one. Not only that, but in the late 1980s, Tripurari Maharaj was out of ISKCON, and he wrote an article for Back to Godhead, and I believe a devotee named Sriram was the head of BBT editing or something, a prominent person there, and Los Angeles at the time, and I was with Tripurari Maharaj at the time, and he received a letter back on BBT letterhead which said, "Your article is fantastically Krishna conscious." It wasn't political, it wasn't historical, which can be political. It was simply, he said, fantastically Krishna consciousness. But unfortunately, since you are not in ISKCON, we cannot publish it. Society consciousness, trying to rule over Krishna consciousness. But if you think about BTG, you go back in time, you'll find letters in the folio of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada is instructing them to publish articles by OBL Kapoor, his godbrother. He didn't even refer to him as his initiated name, which was Adikeshu Das. He says, publish more articles by my godbrother, OBL Kapoor, and this will, I forget the word he used, but this will bolster the quality, the substance of Back to Godhead magazine. And why nobody reads that magazine today? Because it doesn't have any substance. It just has pictures, new paintings of Krishna. This festival, that festival, Hari Bol, chant, dance, and be happy. And yes, it's spreading all over the world. But when the storm comes, as storms do come, who will be ready to weather the storm? If you don't understand Guru-tattva and get it right from the very beginning, as Goswami has pointed out to me, it's highly unlikely that you will understand the other tattvas properly. All right, so I think we've rambled on enough for today, but we've mentioned a few things about the Guru-tattva, and we welcome your opinions out there. If you happen to be watching this, friend or foe, appraises are nice. We like to be told, oh, that was really great. But I tell you more interestingly, make your best shot, and we appreciate your criticisms, either constructive or hateful, whatever. Give us your best shot, and hey, if you'd like to be on a talk with us, then we'd be more than happy to one of us to bow out here on one of these three screens and put your holiness in there too, and we will talk about these things. Not always, though, are we just going to pull the thing down to the problems of the Hare Krishna movement, because, really, my history stands for that itself, or whatever legacy I have. I don't spend much time with that, but I do see it as an important part. But we want to move on and move left and right and talk about many amazing and interesting things about the Hare Krishna movement, both past and present, and share those things with the devotees, and those things will be predominantly in the positive realm, in the positive sense. All right, any closing comment there, Goswami or Giri?
Any questions from anybody from your side? Did anyone send any questions?
There were more people watching today. Got a few hearts up here on the screen. Got a few thumbs up. Where's the thumbs up? Got the thumbs up. It's a funny thing. Thumbs up, yeah. Thumbs up, yeah. Thumbs up. There's even a soda in India. Thumbs up, thumbs up. You watch the Gladiator movies. Thumbs up. Let them live. Let them live. Bad, down, bad, bad, bad. Hollywood created that. Actually, it's just the other way around. In the Roman gladiator pits, where this whole thing really
took off.
This meant throw away. No, this meant stick him in the throat. Give it to him. Kill him. And this meant throw down your weapons.
Yeah.
So one gladiator would stand over another, waiting for the crowd to roar and the emperor to give him a thumbs up. Where's the camera? Thumbs up or thumbs down? So Hollywood said, thumbs down, give it to him, kill him, And thumbs up was let him live. But actually, it's just the opposite. So, but we appreciate the thumbs up, because today this means, we like it. And, now we got 6 hearts. Really cool. Okay. No questions. So we have received a few questions through WhatsApp and email. We'll get around to those. So that's it for Let's Talk for today. And thank you all for watching. Thank you, Giri Maharaj, for participating, Goswami for participating. And let's talk at another time. Hari Bol.